chug, 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 chug,
Hello and welcome back to the Wizard Staff. I'm your host Guy.
And I'm Blake.
And we are two drunk novices who like to talk about EDH. We drink and swear, so you've been warned. Please drink responsibly when you're talking about children's card games. So, a lot has happened in the last 2 weeks since we released our Voltron episode.
Yeah, a lot more than I thought.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't expected. Like, we have what we're talking about tonight, Companions, the errata, with Death Triggers, also coming to Commander, and then also WotC's recent statement on some of the cards that were banned for racist imagery, and what that means in the Magic the Gathering community. We were definitely planning for this episode to be kind of a smaller one.
Like just Companions.
Yeah, just Companions. Because we knew that since they're problematic to other formats, it was going to be like something was coming, either a lot of bannings in general. But yeah, we thought, okay, short 15-minute episode, and then, announcement for Death Triggers. And we're like, okay, we can just slap that on to the Companions episode, no problem. And then another few days later, WotC's statements come out, and I'm like, okay, this episode is going to
Let's just talk about everything.
Yeah, it's kind of a pre-game episode-ish, where it's not like one main topic, but a lot of smaller topics. So it's more like 3 pre-games in one, I guess, if you want to look at it like that.
Yeah, although they all have affected the rules of the Commander format. So that's how they're all kind of interconnected.
Yes, absolutely. Alright, so before we get into our first topic, what are we drinking tonight, Blake?
Well, I am drinking Eagle Rare, which is a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, and it's been aged 10 years and is actually distilled, aged, bottled, all in Frankfort, Kentucky. Actually from Kentucky. Cool. It's pretty nice.
USA, USA, USA.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
What about you?
I am drinking a bottle of wine called Electric Reindeer. It was given to me and Annie as a gift from some of our friends.
Fun.
Yeah. I don't know, it's a pretty generic white wine. It's been sitting in our kitchen for quite a while, and I was like, you know what? Just gonna drink this tonight. Because I don't like hard liquor, so I didn't want to buy a bourbon, or I didn't want to buy a full bottle of bourbon. And I'm pretty sick of just drinking some of the regular beers that I've been drinking. So, that's how I got to where I am today. That is my life story.
Back to wine mom mode.
Yep. Okay, so let's start. We're going to go in chronological order. So, Companions, Death Triggers, and then I'm just going to call it racist cards, I guess.
Sure.
Okay, so Companions. So there are 10 Companions in Ikoria. Loris, Karuga, Zerda, Garuda, Obosh, Jogentha, Yorion, Yumori, Kihira, and Lutri. And Lutri being the notable one who was automatically banned before its release. But so each one is a legendary creature who has the Companion ability, and that is a ability that lists a deck building rule. If your starting deck follows that rule, then the legendary creature can serve as your chosen companion. So for example, if our majestic friend Karuga is going to be your companion, then your starting deck can't include any cards with converted mana cost 1 or 2. So automatically you wouldn't be able to run Soul Ring.
Usually they were real deck restrictions in EDH.
Yes, you can have up to 1 chosen companion for each game. That chosen companion doesn't start in your main deck, rather it's a card in your sideboard. And with the announcement of Companions, the rules committee also kind of changed the rules where you're allowed to have the companion from outside of the game. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a sideboard in EDH, but they rewrote the rules so that only companions could work for EDH. So it doesn't count as a card toward the minimum deck size in the format you're playing. Just before the game begins, reveal your chosen companions to all players, and then once during the game, but only during your main phase, if the stack is empty, you now pay 3 mana to put your chosen companion into your hand. So previously, before that, it wasn't pay 3 mana, put it into your hand. It was pay 3 mana, go from outside of the game onto the battlefield.
Right.
Now, if it was countered, it would go to your graveyard, and then it would just act like a card in your deck. And if the creature died while it was on the battlefield, it would not go back to quote-unquote the companion zone. It would also just be treated as a normal card. So it's there for good. It's not like your commander where you put it back into a designated zone. It's just now a normal card.
But now you have to pay 3 to put it into your hand.
Yes, and that was the big thing that happened, because companions have been problematic in other formats where the deck building restrictions weren't really that hard to overcome. Specifically, Loris, I think, was the one that was
Really bad.
really terrorizing like Vintage and Legacy. So he got straight up banned in a few formats. But then just in general, companions were eroded from the previous rule to the rule now, where it's pay 3 mana, put it to your hand. Now, another thing to note is paying the 3 mana to add it to your hand, that ability cannot be countered or like interacted with. So it's not like someone can say, no, counterspell that to put it to your hand. You just pay the 3 mana to get it to your hand. Once it's in your hand, then it's just like any other card. So then like they could Thoughtseize you or whatever. So what does this mean for EDH? On EDH Rec, they pulled from a database of 400,000 decks. Did a little research, and of those, 1,535 decks right now have a companion, with about half of those being Kahira.
Huh.
And so 1,535 over 400,000, that's 0.003%.
Wow.
Yeah, that is a very small portion.
That's almost nothing.
I mean, it actually really is nothing. And I do know, I mean, we are pulling these stats about a month and a half from the companion's release. So, yes, initially they are going to be kind of low, but that's much lower than I thought they were going to be in general. I was expecting maybe a little more than just 1,535.
Yeah, but I do overall feel like these numbers are pretty accurate. Before they were nerfed, companions weren't really played all that much, except for, like you said, Kahira. I understand they're like breaking other formats at the time, but Commander, it was like, they're fine. They're just little cherry on top. They're nothing problematic.
Yeah, it was an added bonus, because I'll read through each of the deck building restrictions real quick. So Loris, each permanent has a CMC 2 or less. Karuga, each permanent has CMC 3 or more. Zerda, each non-land card has an activated ability. Garuda, each card has an even converted mana cost. Obosh, each card has an odd converted mana cost. Jogentha, each card has only no duplicate color mana symbols, so you can't run cards like Mana Drain or Counterspell. Yorion, starting deck has more than 20 cards than the minimal, so you can't even run that as a companion in Commander. Lutri, automatically banned, but his was each non-land card has a different name. Yumori, each card is the same permanent type. And then Kahira, each creature is a cat, dinosaur, elemental, nightmare, or beast. And Kahira, unsurprisingly, is the one that is played the most because it can easily be spotted into any like Arabo deck, which was the cat commander from 2017 Commanders.
And that's because people build it cat tribal, right?
Yeah, pretty much. So, even though companions weren't too problematic in EDH, personally I think it's good that the rules changed with Commander as well.
Yeah.
Since we need to have union between WotC and the RC, so there's no confusion when it's you're coming from one format to another. It's just that consistency is nice. And of the 10 companions, it is really hard to see any of them making like a meaningful impact, just because those deck building restrictions that we just mentioned, other than Yorion and Lutri, are pretty impactful. So unless if you are willing to commit to those, it seems like you would just be running the deck for a casual purpose at that point.
What about Lutri, though? Lutri, it's the one that was banned before everything else.
So, yes, everyone was kind of, oh, okay. The companion rules changed, so what is Lutri? What's happening to Lutri? We put up a couple polls on Twitter. Well, I think first was, are you happy with the rules change? Or what would you have done differently? And a majority of the people that we got numbers from said that it's fine. Like, they weren't even running companions. A couple people said, like, 3 seems a little high, probably would have done 2. And I am kind of interested to see how, WotC came to that conclusion of making it 3 instead of 2. Yeah, so Lutri, getting back to him. So yeah, we ran a second poll about Lutri asking, oh, do we want to keep it banned, unbanned it, or unban it for a limited amount of time? Since Lutri never even got a chance, and now that the rules changed, is it, worth it to like see if Lutri would be as problematic as I think he would be? 50% of our Twitter users said keep it banned, 32% said unban it, 18% said unban it for a limited amount of time. So when you kind of look at it, it's kind of an even split from keeping it banned to unbanning it to some degree, whether if it's permanent or a limited amount of time. Just kind of interesting to see what people thought. And of the decks that could run him, 4% of decks from the most built commanders of the last 2 years would allow him to become an auto-include. And so what I mean is, when you go to EDH Rec and you look at most popular commanders built in the last 2 years, 4% of the commanders that are listed on that list include blue and red in their color identities, so they would automatically be able to run him. Still pretty small number, but even though the rules change for companion, Lutri being unbanned is like slim to none, and more likely none. Lutri was banned because he was the definition of being an auto-include for all blue-red decks, and even though companions are worse now, there's still no deck building restriction that Lutri needs to get around. He still would just be an auto-include in any deck that you want to run him in, which is Singleton.
There's no reason that he should be unbanned. Like, the reasons he was banned aren't affected at all with this new change. Like, it's actually kind of concerning that about 50% of people are like, yeah, let's unban it, because they clearly don't understand the card at all. That makes me sad. Like, he's really cute, okay? I get it. He's very cute. I love animals. Like, I want to play him, but like, he's banned because he just doesn't work with the rules of the format. And the changes didn't change that at all. So, no. Just no.
And I mean, to be honest, if he were some other creature that wasn't like an elemental otter, probably nobody would give as much of a shit.
Yeah, honestly.
They just really like the fact that he's an otter, and he's a cute otter.
I know.
And I mean, even if you were to unban all cards on the ban list, Lutri's still the one that is the most problematic, just because of his, just the fact that he kind of gives that unfair advantage to all the blue-red decks.
Pretty much, yeah. I think that's a fair statement. It's one of the last cards that could ever be unbanned for this format. Survivor style. Should we move on to death triggers?
Oh, yeah. Got companions out of the way. Then a few more days come along, and we have the Command Fest Online, which was an event hosted by Channel Fireball, where throughout the day you could get online, spell table, play some EDH games, since right now we're all practicing social distancing, And throughout the day, they had different people give a little talk. Gavin Verhey revealed a few artworks for some of the cards in Commander Masters. All very exciting stuff, but the Rules Committee also had kind of a panel, and they announced that death triggers were now going to work for your commander. And so what do we mean by like death triggers? Well, originally, if your commander had a clause on it where it said, when this card dies, X goes off, that would mean that your commander would not trigger that ability because it didn't actually die. Die means that it went to the graveyard, stayed there. Commanders don't go to the graveyard unless if you want them to. Most people send them back to the command zone, so even when you send it back to the command zone, the death trigger doesn't go off. So the new rules, and I'm going to read verbatim, state if a commander is in a graveyard or in exile, and that card was put into that zone since the last time state-based actions were checked, its owner may put it into the command zone. If a commander would be put into its owner's library or hand from anywhere, its owner may put it into the command zone instead. This replacement effect may apply more than once to the same event.
So what does that even mean?
Well, it's a little different between the two, where one's a state-based action, which is it going to the graveyard, and the second one is a replacement effect.
So all this is a little bit abstract. Can you like kind of explain this with an example for people to understand?
Yeah, so the popular commander that everyone is now trying to build a deck around was Alinda Duskrose, 2 white and a black, legendary creature Vampire Knight with lifelink, and whenever another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Alinda. When Alinda dies, create X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is Alinda's power, and she's a 1/1. So originally when Alinda dies, and if she was your commander, then the second part where she creates X 1/1 creature tokens, that wouldn't trigger. Now, if your commander dies and has that death trigger, then it'll go to the graveyard, trigger happens, and then you can move the commander back to the command zone.
So now she'll actually get all those 1/1 creature tokens that which she was originally intended to do.
Yes, yes. So then going back to the new rules, the second part of the text, where it's if a commander will be put into owner's hand or library from anywhere, those are hidden zones. So those were added because of cards like Chaos Warp, since Watsy and the Rules Committee thought things would get a little hairy, trying to keep track of if you do put it into your deck and then put it into your command zone. It gets a little hard to like keep track of the card, and it's just kind of cumbersome, so they separated the two just to make it a little more clean and easy for us.
So which commanders got increased in power a little bit by this?
Yeah, so believe it or not, there were quite a few commanders who got like a power up from this. So we just mentioned Alinda Duskrose. We got Child of Alara, who is a Wooburg commander. When he's sent to the graveyard, he destroys all non-land permanents. Rolesque, something like that, who's a Simic commander from War of the Spark. When he dies, you proliferate. And I remember revealing that.
So do I.
Yeah, I now think like, oh, that's such a garbage card. Like, why would you even build this?
Yeah, it's like it's hard enough that it was like in green and blue, and then you give a dice trigger that doesn't work. That's just so cruel.
Yeah, and I figured out that the way that people were trying to get around that dying effect,
Clone effects.
Yeah, we're create a clone, have the clone die.
It was just too many hoops though.
Yeah, so
now it's slightly less impossible.
Well, it's not even like less impossible. It just really helps.
I know, I'm being a jerk.
I don't think it's the strongest proliferate commander. Like, that's a track set for sure, but you got Anax, who just came out with Theros Beyond Death, and so when he dies, he would create a satyr if his power and toughness met the requirements needed. However, he was also already like kind of okay because it wasn't just when he died, is when any creature with a certain power and toughness died. The Kamigawa dragons all have some kind of dying trigger. Kokusho, who that was the one that was banned for a while. Every opponent loses 5 life, and then you gain life equal to the life lost. Jugen, who probably will never really be built, but distribute 5+1/+1 counters among creatures. Kaiga. So Jugen's the green one, Kokusho's the black one, Kaiga's the blue one. Gain control of target creature. Yosei, the white one, tap 5 permanents. They don't untap on next untap step. And then Ryusei, Raisu?
Raiseu. We're trying, guys. Magic names are hard.
Yeah, but I mean, we owe it to at least, try and, do our best. When he dies, deal 5 damage to all creatures that don't have flying. And there was also another cycle of spirits from Kamigawa that had Soul Shift that we'll probably still see little to no play. But so now when they die, they create, or Soul Shift is like you get a spirit token with CMC less than the spirit that just died. So those probably won't see the light of day.
Yeah, overall, this is about a dozen commanders that are boosted. What does this mean, though, in terms of the 99 or the main deck? Well, there's whenever a creature dies, effect goes off. Now it's a little bit better because now commanders are included in that calculus. Blood Artist triggers, now they will also trigger when those commanders go to the grave, and it's just easier to keep track of. And, we haven't mentioned all the cards, but there's also like Grave Pact, Dictate of Erebos, and stuff like that, really helping Edict decks, various other cards. Overall, I think it's fine, though. It's increasing the power level of certain commanders and certain cards, but not too much. It's not like these cards are now suddenly OP.
Yeah. I would recommend, if anyone is really into wanting to know more of the minutes of all this, the Command Zone did a really good video, and I don't want to repeat everything that they said verbatim, but the big takeaway for me is just like, it was kind of hard to understand why dice effects didn't trigger initially when your commander died. So it seems a little more intuitive with this new rule as to, okay, when my commander dies, I will get this effect, as to, okay, wait, why don't I get this effect?
Well, that was one of the main reasons why this change happened, was because so many people, especially new players to the format, thought that this is what was happening all along. And then the other reason was WotC has talked to the rules committee that they wanted it to change so that they could print new legendary creatures in the future for commanders, because it would open up some design space. And so, like, you may ask yourself, like, well, why didn't this happen sooner? And even just from us talking, you can probably figure out, like, this is really hard to create the rules for this sort of thing to work the way people want it to work, but also be very elegant and not make a bunch of weird corner case things that make the game really complicated and not comprehensible.
Yeah, I think
so it took a long time.
I think a good example of what was kind of happening with WotC and trying to get around the effect of, dice triggers was the Gerard card that was Boros. Because I forget how it's specifically worded, but it was pretty much like you would exile him and then return. Somehow, like, he would still be able to be exiled and return to the command zone.
Yeah, that's a good example. WotC was trying to get around EDH's former rules, and
right. So that just also becomes kind of confusing, and just to make it easier for them when they are designing cards that say, "Oh, when this legendary creature dies," because that also legendary creatures, while not all of them are made for commander, they are, also played in like standard. It just makes it easier.
Because that is on WotC's mind. Every time they do make a legendary creature, they always have to consider, okay, what are Commander players gonna say about this card?
Right, and why add more confusing text when we could just simplify the rules a little more to allow it to be the way that you think it would work?
So, Guy, even though this announcement kind of came out of nowhere, like nobody was expecting the Rules Committee to announce this on the day of Command Fest, how do you feel about it overall? Do you feel like this was a bad decision or a good decision? I feel like this is great. It has almost all upside and almost no downside.
Yeah, I think there's no downside in terms of gameplay. There's definitely going to be some cards that get powered up, some cards that get powered down. Again, if you want to learn more about those cards, go to the Command Zone, watch their video. And I mean, you probably already are if you're listening to us. Yeah, it's cool. I don't think that there's any commanders that I am personally interested in building now because of this rule. We'll just have to see what future commanders come out, and maybe there's something I want to build for the future. But now I don't have to worry about those kind of things.
Yeah, that's what I'm most excited for. Like, now that this gate has been opened, like, okay, WotC can do some fun things now.
Alright, so we're going to move on to the last portion of our episode. And so, like we said, just several things came out days after each thing was announced. So you had the companions eroded, you had then death triggers, rules change, and then I don't want to say this was out of nowhere, because obviously WotC was kind of lining this up with the current real world events with all the protests going on and addressing racism.
That's still a very sudden announcement.
Yeah, but it still was kind of sudden, and I was not expecting it. But it kind of makes sense why, you know, they're choosing now to do this. But also, full disclaimer, Black Lives Matter, and if you have a problem with that, fuck off from the podcast. That's the one time I'm going to get kind of political here. If you're still listening, thank you. But, alright, let's keep talking. So, there has been a call to action for everyone to do better about representation for Black lives and POC. From the protesting of police brutality to companies' lack of true representation, all of us need to do better about supporting Black lives. And over the past few weeks, there have been concerns about Wizards of the Coast's history with racism in art for some of their cards, and the lack of Black artists and employees who are hired to create this quote-unquote inclusive game. I mean, we often talk about, you know, the diversity that we see in all these characters that we love, but when you see the people making it and it's very whitewashed, it's kind of a little tone deaf, you know? Because they're trying to create this image of inclusivity when a majority of the people behind the game are white. And people have been trying to say, you need more representation. So, following the world events, on June 10th, WotC released a statement about racism depicted in art. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to read kind of the main part. So, the events of the past few weeks and the ongoing conversation about how we can better support people of color have caused us to examine ourselves and actions and our inactions. We appreciate everyone helping us to recognize when we fall short. We should have been better, we can be better, and we will be better. To that end, we will be removing a number of images from our database that are racist or culturally offensive, including Invoke Prejudice, Cleanse, Stone Throwing Devils, Pradesh Gypsies, Jihad, Imprison, and Crusade. These card images will be replaced with the following statement. We have removed this card image from our database due to its racist depiction, text, or combination thereof. Racism in any form is unacceptable and has no place in our games nor anywhere else. Shortly, and I mean very shortly after this announcement was made, there was another announcement made by the Rules Committee. Effective June 10th, 2020, Wizards of the Coast is removing 7 cards from all their constructed formats. We support the message they are sending through this action and stand with them in attempts to foster a more inclusive and positive culture. We will be following suit in Commander.
Yeah, so this message from WotC, it's pretty focused, it's direct and well worded. It's both an apology and a promise to do better in the future. Guy, I'm kind of curious, did you know of any of these cards before this announcement? Because I knew about most of them. There were like 1 or 2 that I hadn't seen before.
And one thing about right now, we're not going to go into the specifics of like why each card was banned for whatever reason. It's just they are depicting racism to some degree. I knew about Invoke Prejudice and Stone Throwing Devils specifically, just from some people talking. And after doing some research, some of these cards have actually been very problematic from their initial inception. Invoke Prejudice, I think, is the one that often gets called out.
That's probably the most well known.
Yeah. I actually got to hold one in my hand a while ago. Or I want to say like a year and a half ago. Because one of my friends, his dad is really into Magic the Gathering, or he was. And he has like a very, very good collection of old cards. And I specifically remember going through them and seeing Invoke Prejudice and being like, huh, the art is a little concerning, but that effect seems very good. And I was very perplexed. But even then, learning in the past couple days, I've learned that the artist who made that card is a Nazi. So, yeah, if I had known that, I would actually have just ripped up the card. Back on track, though. So yeah, these cards have been problematic from the start. And I am glad that WotC is taking action and apologizing. But it does seem like they are taking advantage of the moment to make this apology. And it is better late than never, I guess. Since, you're just kind of making this apology now during these events. It's not like you were, making this apology shortly after this card was released and people were saying things about it.
Yeah.
What will be important to me, though, is just kind of their follow-up and what they do to try and create a more inclusive environment at WotC and how they accomplish that. I think that's what's just going to be more important. Is right now it's kind of like talk, whereas I want to see some follow-up.
Yeah, that I was going to say the same thing. Going forward, it's going to be interesting to see what they actually do now that they've kind of admitted fault, basically. I want to kind of now move on to the Rules Committee's message, which I am glad that they made the statement. Again, it's sort of under the idea of doing what other formats are doing, making sure that all the formats that are kind of consistent, and I'm glad that they've done that. The small one little nitpick, though, I have about this, they weren't very clear in their message that they were banning the cards that same day. They were just like, oh, we will follow suit in Commander. And I looked at that, I'm like, okay, cool. So maybe next banning quarterly announcement, they'll ban them. And I went on with my day because I was pretty busy. And then I checked, oh, they banned those 7 cards that same day. And that wasn't clear to me. And it's like, you need to be clear about these sorts of things with this kind of subject matter.
We talked a little about this beforehand, but personally, I felt the opposite. It did seem clear to me what they were saying about that these cards will be banned in Commander. Since WotC's doing it right now, we're doing it right now. But what would have been just more impactful to me is a better statement about how Magic the Gathering is for everyone. Their statement was more like, yeah, we're going to do this too, more so than it was. Commander is about trying to include everyone. of all races and all social identities, where it just kind of felt shorthanded. It didn't...
You felt maybe they could have said just a little bit more.
They could have said a little bit more. They could have said something a little more impactful. But it was clear to me that, like, okay, these cards are banned. And, I mean, good riddance. It's not like we saw these cards being played all that much beforehand. Like, Crusade might be the only one that I can think of that might have been in play.
I will say, I didn't mention this earlier, but I did play a couple years back, play a game where someone played Crusade, and we literally stopped the game for like 30 seconds to point out, like, this is a really weird art. And, like, it did interrupt the flow of the game. Like, we did keep going, but it was just like, you know, this is weird and uncomfortable.
And I know that card was... I think that's one of the ones where people felt WotC was kind of making a stretch, because the art is a little iffy, and Crusade does have some historical context, but the effect of all white creatures in a boost with the historical context, with the art, just all kind of made it seem like white supremacy.
Yeah, you need to see the big picture here.
Before we end, just gonna have like one last thing I'd like to say, because I see a lot of people talking about their response to these cards getting banned, and they're like, get over it, it's just a game, stop pandering to snowflakes about this, you know, everyone can find offense in something. And yeah, it's just a game, and yet you could maybe find offense about every card. But are you trying to make that point because you're actually bothered by the card? Or you're trying to prove a point? And I think there's a distinct difference between feeling hurt by real history versus something minute that you're just trying to point out to kind of be like an asshole.
Yeah, basically.
Because Magic the Gathering is a game that is meant for everyone. And while you may not be offended by the cards that, you know, were banned, they were banned because of the history and disrespect that they have to a group of people who have been oppressed by systematic racism for hundreds of years. So for those individuals to come to this game and see those kind of cards, it just hurts a little. And what difference does it make to you as someone who isn't offended by them for them to leave the game?
Yeah. It's overall just like a better thing.
Yeah, it all in all just kind of helps the message of Commander or Magic the Gathering is all about the gathering. So we want to make sure everyone feels welcome rather than try and push people out in disrespectful ways.
Yep.
Well, yeah. So that's kind of a heavy note to end on. And moving forward, I will just encourage you to educate yourself and try to
educate yourself.
go out, help where you can. I think by the time this episode is released, there's a zine that I was a part of that, if you don't know what a zine is, it's like a mini magazine of art. Some artists and I were part of this collaborative project where we did this zine where we each drew a Pokemon gym leader, and we're going to sell them. All the money is going to go to, I think, Black Lives Matter or NAACP. Yeah, if you're interested in buying that, I will provide links probably on Twitter and on Facebook, wherever, just so you can get your hands on one. I will also include some links in the descriptions of these episodes so that you're able to donate to some organizations.
I do want to add one more note, which is it's a good thing that WotC was overall pretty well worded and focused in their message, because this article got a lot of publicity. I saw it on other news websites outside of, like, you know, just like my typical Magic the Gathering circles. I saw this on more semi-major news outlet websites.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I even messaged you, Blake, but every day on work, one of the first things I do is I check Hypebeast, which is a fashion entertainment website that has just news about some of the crazier things that are going on right now in the world in terms of entertainment. And this made it up to like second most read article of that day, which I never thought. Things where you see like Nike often kind of taking those kind of positions, where Magic the Gathering was one of those where it's like, ooh, wow, this is gaining traction.
Yeah, got attention.
With that, we're going to end the episode. Thank you all for listening. We hope you had a great time. You can find us on Instagram at thewizardstaff101, Twitter, wizardstaff101. You can send us an email at thewizardstaff101@gmail.com. We have a Facebook. Give us a like and review on anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. Help spread the word. Stay safe. Hope everyone's doing okay. And we will talk to you soon. Next episode is Core Set 2021. Woo! Yeah. Alright. Peace.
Peace.